tragedy, but this book made me laugh so hard. Nah, it was hilarious. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, Nigerian in London. My name is Dabi. If you are new here, welcome. If you are not new here, welcome back. Now it is January 2022, the start of a new year, and I know a lot of people like to add something reading related to their New Year's resolution, their plans for the new year and stuff. So I thought I would share some books that I have read and loved by African writers that I believe every one of these are worth reading, or are worth reading this year. A bit of background about me: I am obviously a Nigerian in London. I normally make videos about life in London in general, and that's kind of what inspired this video. I think when you are kind of an African in diaspora, or just someone who isn't in like their home country, you miss home sometimes, and for me, reading books from the homeland kind of helps me connect. I do generally read very diversely. I think as at the end of last year, I read 62 books in total last year. So I read like books from all sorts of backgrounds all around the world, but African books obviously have a very special place in my heart. So I'll get straight into it. So the first book is Half of a Yellow Sun by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. If you know anything about me, you should know that this woman, I absolutely love her. I will read anything written by her. But this was the first book by her I actually read. I read it years ago. I think I was in secondary school or right after secondary school. And it's called Half of a Yellow Sun. It is set in the 1960s in Nigeria. The book starts off right before the Biafra War, but the majority of the book is set during the Biafra War. It is, yeah, as I said, it is set during the war, but it's not really a war book, if that makes sense. It's almost like taking you through people's life experiences during the war. I think this book is a fantastic job. Just for a bit of background as to another reason why this book is so special to me, I went to school, secondary school in Nigeria, and we weren't actually ever taught about the Biafra War, which is odd, right? Because it's the most recent war we've had as a people, and a lot of the effects of like the war still come up in everyday life, sometimes without us knowing it. So this book really helped me to understand and even have more of a curiosity about that war and about my people and my country. Fantastic storytelling. It has quite the love story in there, a lot of plot twists. It is, for lack of a better word, a masterpiece. So the next book is Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi. This book, another banger. I read it actually twice last year. I read it on my own once, and then again for book club. But it is set in both America and Ghana. The writer is Ghanaian. It's a very interesting one. What I love most about this book is two things. One is the story of immigrants and how they immigrated, and also what life was like as immigrants. So kind of the immigrant experience, which is obviously very close to my heart, even though the countries aren't exactly the same. But I'll read the kind of blurb of the book so you can have a bit of an idea of what it's like. As a child, Gifty would ask her parents to tell her the story of their journey from Ghana to Alabama, seeking escape in myths of heroism and romance. When her father and brother succumbed to the hard reality of immigrant life in the American South, their family of 4 becomes 2, and the life Gifty dreamed the life Gifty dreamed of slips away. Years later, desperate to understand the addiction that destroyed her brother's life, she turns to science for answers. But when her mother comes to stay, Gifty soon learns that the roots of their tangled traumas reach further than she ever thought. That is where I'm gonna stop. It's a very special book, and I think in the context of kind of immigrant life as well, it's the first time I ever read about addiction and how addiction affects not only the individual but the lives of the people around them. And I thought that was just a really unique story, really unique perspective, and that is Transcendent Kingdom by Yaa Gyasi. Going back to Nigeria now, The Girl with the Louding Voice by Abi Dare. This book, I loved this book. Like, even thinking about it just makes me smile, because the main character, Aduni, was so likable. What I think is special about this book is the fact that the perspective is written from is the perspective of someone who is a house girl. If you are not Nigerian or not African or not familiar with the concept of a house girl is kind of like help you have at home. They are usually paid. The circumstances of like house girls honestly vary very greatly, but what I would say is that one constant in general tends to be they're almost people who are seen and not heard, and then this book comes and just gives that character, gives that perspective life. So I really loved that. Another special thing about this book is most of it is written in kind of pidgin English, which I thought is really unique. I've never seen that before. One thing I will say is, even though it's written in pidgin English, I know a lot of people who don't speak pidgin English, people who are not Nigerians who read it and were able to understand it. So I really like that. I think it was quite realistic, because a lot of people kind of in the position of the protagonist, being a house girl, being Nigerian as well, tend to speak pidgin English on kind of a day-to-day. That's what they tend to do. Again, you kind of learn through the story that doesn't, what someone speaks or how someone speaks in terms of like their what's it called, how do you even say it, like how well they speak a particular language doesn't mean there's anything less intelligent about them or their voices are not worth hearing. Fantastic book, this. And next up, we are traveling all the way to South Africa, and we have Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. Now, I don't have a physical copy of this because I borrowed it from the library years ago, and honestly, the story really stuck like with me. Now, I will say, and don't come for me, I don't usually find Trevor Noah funny. His stand-up, I don't usually find funny. I don't know what it is, like everybody has a unique sense of humor. I just don't get it usually, but this book made me laugh so hard. Nah, it was hilarious. And the funny thing is, there are parts of this book that are hard because like Trevor Noah was quite literally born a crime. As that when he was born in South Africa, it was illegal for a black person, his mom was black, and a white person, his dad was white, to have a child together. So he was literal evidence of like their illegal act, if that makes sense. And like one thing about this book, his mom, the woman is nuts. And I love her. She was one of my favorite characters in the book. I say characters, but it is a memoir. But I learned so much about South Africa and the experiences of black people in South Africa, what it was like growing up in apartheid for a mixed race young boy. Like there's so much, like he did go through so much suffering and so much pain, but obviously he's a comedian now, so you could kind of see that he's obviously always found some things funny, and had a way to make difficult situations still funny, if that makes sense. And South Africa as a country, I think before reading this, I didn't know as much as I probably should have about apartheid and the black slash mixed race experience in South Africa. So I think this book is absolutely worth reading. It's educative, it's funny, it's not even that long. There's like no reason not to read this one. So going back to Nigeria now, and honestly in creating this video, I realized that I read a lot of Nigerian books. I didn't realize how much. I guess I'm Nigerian, so that shouldn't be surprising. But I have been trying to read more from the continent in general. But anyways, Lagoon by Nnedi Okorafor. This, when you think about aliens landing on Earth, do you not always just think they'd go to America, right? Or maybe London, maybe even Germany, but no one really thinks about like, what if they came to Africa? What if the aliens decided they like the Africans, or Africa is where they're gonna start conquering the world from, or whatever, right? That's where this book comes in. I'm gonna read the blurb because I don't want to give too much away, if that makes sense. Three strangers, each isolated by his or her own problem. Adaora, the marine biologist. Anthony, the world-famous rapper. Agu, the troubled soldier. Wandering the beach outside Lagos, Nigeria's capital city. They're more alone than they've ever been. But when a meteorite hits the ocean and a tidal wave overcomes them, these three people will find themselves bound together in ways they've never imagined. Together with Ayodele, a visitor from beyond the stars, they must race through Lagos and against time itself in order to save the city, the world, and themselves. If that's not enough to make you read this one, I don't know what is. My father-in-law, actually, it's funny, when I went to Nigeria, I got a copy of this for my father-in-law because he's super into sci-fi. He's not Nigerian, and then it turns out he'd read the book already, and he'd read so many other books by Nnedi Okorafor. So it turns out, I believe not sure, but it turns out Nnedi has a lot of books. So if you enjoy this one, there's more where that came from. Now we are traveling back down to Rwanda. The Girl Who Smiled Beats by Clementine Wamaria. Have you ever read a book that stayed with you, and like in the most random moments when you're doing something completely unrelated, parts of the book just like jump into your mind? That's what this is for me. This is a memoir. This is the writer. The story is also about her life. She was born in Rwanda and was still pretty young. I believe she was less than 5 when the kind of Rwandan war happened. She lived through the war, the Rwandan civil war, and ended up being an refugee in multiple countries. I think 7 or 8, if I'm not mistaken, multiple African countries before then ending up in America. This is such a unique story. Like every time I think about like refugees, every time refugees come up in the news or something, I remember this and one other book, The Beekeeper of Aleppo. But these are stories that need to be told, need to be heard, need to be understood, so we can understand truly what life could be like in these people's positions. Let me read a bit of the book for you. When Clementine was 6 years old, her world was torn apart. She didn't know why her parents began talking in whispers, or why her neighbors started disappearing, or why she could hear distant thunder even when the skies were clear. As the Rwandan civil war raged, Clementine and her sister Claire were forced to flee their home. They ran for hours They walked for days, not toward anything, just away. They sought refuge where they could find it and escaped when refuge became imprisonment. Together they experienced the best and the worst of humanity. That line, there were some horrible people that they came across, and there were some amazing people as well. After spending 6 years seeking refuge in 8 different countries, Clementine and Claire granted refugee status in America and began a new journey. And the story, what I like about the story is that it doesn't end like just when they get to America. They've had so many experiences before getting to America, and then she shares what it was like trying to kind of acclimatize to living in a developed country and living in a country that was just so different from her own, without most of her family, just being alone. She was a child and almost not even being able to be a child anymore. It's a very complex kind of experience, and you really need to read it to understand what I'm talking about. If you end up reading any of these books, please let me know. If you enjoyed them, if you've read them before, drop a comment down below. I'd like to hear what you guys have to think. I need to know why this woman, Olashone, has 1 book. I really wish she could write more. I wish I could, like, maybe I should write her an email begging to write more books, because this book is very amazing. I actually watched the play of it at some point. It is the story of Baba Segi and his 4 wives, actually. So 3 wives that he had before, a 4th one who was quite different from the rest of the family because she was a lot more educated, came from like a more middle class background, but there was quite the secret. And what I like is the book kind of takes you through the life of each of the main characters. So it's almost like there are 5 main characters. There's Baba Segi and then each of the wives, and at some point you really hate some of the characters. Like, some of the wives are just horrible people. Baba Segi himself is like so annoying, but when you kind of hear his story, you almost understand where he, like, what formed him, where he's from, and like how he ended up being the way he did. And that's something I really liked about this book. I feel like the characters were like actually quite complex in that they weren't good or bad necessarily. No one is good or bad. They kind of, the writer was able to, Lola Shonen was able to intertwine that like complex, the complex nature of humanity, which is that like people have so many different sides to them, and you can almost relate more to people when you know their stories. And the secret at the end, I did not see it coming. Yeah, Secret Lives of Baba Segi's Wives by Lola Shonen. So moving continents, and actually we're hopping over to Europe now. This book is set in Brussels, or at least the present day part of the book is set in Brussels. So the name of the book is On Black Sister Street by Chica, unigui. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that properly. This is a powerful book, as it says on the cover. It is the story of 4 different African women who currently live in Brussels. They are sex workers in Brussels, and the book kind of takes you through how each of them ended up where they did at the time. And I feel like at the start you kind of feel like their lives and like everything is really bleak, and just they're just not nice people, not people you have, you know, sometimes when you have a connection to a character in the book, you just don't have much of a connection until they start to tell their stories, and then you're like, oh, that explains why you are the way you are. I think there's a bit of a theme in the kind of books that I tend to like, but I'll read a bit of the book to you. This one had so many twists and turns, and like honestly, it's one of those ones where I'm just like, women go through so much in life. 4 very different women have made their way from Africa to the red light district of Brussels. They have come to claim for themselves the riches they believe Europe promises. But when Sisi, the most enigmatic of the women, is murdered, their already fragile world is shattered. Drawn together by the tragedy, the remaining 3 women, Joyce, a great beauty whose life has been devastated by war, Ama, whose dark moods hide a past injustice, and Efe, whose determination to earn her keep is motivated by a particular zeal, slowly begin to share their stories. They are stories of fear, displacement, love, and most of all, they are stories of a sinister man called Dele. Guys, this isn't even a spoiler, but we hate Dele. Dele is a terrible person. Yeah. This story, I think, is a very important one and also very unique because there is a large community of women, African women, who end up in different parts of Europe in kind of sex work. Some against their will, some not, some as a result of just wanting a better life. Some people are essentially sex slaves. And these stories are important to hear because I think it reminds us of a certain humanity in people which seems to get lost in the conversation at times. So this as well was one of those that really stayed with me. I'd like to visit Brussels someday. Going back to Nigeria again, The Joys of Motherhood by Buchi Emecheta. This was a present to me actually by a friend of mine who happens to not be Nigerian. She's Asian, and I can't believe I've never read this before or never even heard of it. It is actually a classic, and this was the first book that made me realize that like classics don't necessarily need to be like Jane Eyre or Shakespeare or George Orwell. Like there are African classics as well, and upon reading this, I get why it's a classic. I'll read you a short part of the blurb. The Joys of Motherhood tells the story of Nwego, a West African woman devoted to her children, giving them all her life. With the result of that, she finds herself friendless and alone in middle age. The Joys of Motherhood is a powerful commentary on polygamy, patriarchy, and women's roles changing in urban Nigeria. Beautiful book. So in a bid to mix things up a bit, I actually decided to add in a YA book. YA is young adult, if you don't know what that stands for. And this is Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. I believe they have another book that's The Death of Vivek Oji, that's a lot more popular. I actually haven't read that one yet, but upon reading this, I wasn't crazy about it at first until we discussed it in book club, and then it almost started to unlock parts of the book that I hadn't kind of completely understood, which is why I enjoy talking about books in general. But I'll read an excerpt of this for you. Pet is here to hunt a monster. Are you brave enough to look? There are no more monsters anymore, or so the children of the city of Lucille are taught. With doting parents and a best friend named Redemption, Jam has grown up with this lesson all her life. But when she meets Pet, a creature made of horns, colors, and claws, who emerges from one of her mother's paintings and a drop of Jam's blood, she must consider what she has been told. Reconsider, that is. So that's all I'm gonna read from there. It's an amazing book. I have a copy of it. I have a copy of it somewhere, but I can't find it at the moment. But I think it's a very interesting book because, one, the writer of the book is African, but they are also non-binary. The protagonist is trans, is a teenager, but is also trans. And I think, again, on theme with me being me, I just love hearing and reading about different perspectives that are different from my own, and learning about that experience, even though sometimes I do this through reading fiction, because I do think that's possible. So that's why this was really special for me. I think I learned quite a lot from this book. I hope you have enjoyed today's video. I'm very much open to suggestions on books by other African writers. I'm always trying to find out more about more and more African writers, read more about our people, so feel free to share that in the comment section. I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.